Thank you so much for coming on to Everyday Endorphins. It is so great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of fun.
I'm really, fascinated by your individual stories and how the two of you met. And when we got to chat about a month or so ago, it was really exciting for me to learn about your book, Billion Dollar Mind, which I had the chance to read. And I loved it because I love learning about all things resilience and mindset and lessons we can learn from sports. So there's a lot we're going to dive into today. But before we start talking about Billion Dollar Mind, I want to backtrack a little bit and have each of you share a little bit about yourselves, your backgrounds, and how the two of you met.
Your serve.
Oh, it's my turn. It's my turn.
Her serve.
I would say, so I grew up in Georgia, which was very nice. I grew up in a very, very conservative family, very hardworking, and played tennis and studied as a child. And I kept growing and competing in tennis. And I remember, I was lucky. I don't know how we didn't have the internet back then. There were no iPhones, there was no internet, and there was no Google by any means. So I remember when I think I had played Rick's Student and I'd won, and for whatever reason, I had gotten a letter in the mail from him or from his academy to come check it out. And I never forget the moment. I still remember the day when I got this letter. And I was like, wow, there's a tennis academy. Wow. And as I saw Rick's face, I'll be like, wow. I told my mom, I said, let's go here. I want to check it out because I really didn't have a very good coach at that time. And my mom was helping me, and I would study it on my own, study tennis. And then I'll never forget when I met Rick, he was just so incredibly positive and just so motivating. And one of the things, there's just so many fun stories, but I could tell you the one thing that was just so fascinating about Rick was that only coach I've ever met that's still on the courts when it's raining, still on the courts and training kids at like Sunday afternoon. And it's like, 6 or 7 p.m. I have not seen one coach. I haven't seen one person be so dedicated. I was just like impressed. It's raining. There's not one person who would not, everyone would have an excuse to go home and do something else because there's raining, it's Sunday. There was nothing like that in Rick's mind. I was like enchanted. I was like, where is he now? He's like, training another student. And he was there the earliest and always there the latest and just kind of motivated him. Phenomenal experience. And that's how I met him. And then over the years, I kind of moved closer and closer to him. And he's out here in Boca. And I ultimately moved to Orlando, but then would come to his academy and bring my kids sometimes. And I saw these amazing quotes. Incredible. I mean, cool. They were just like motivating me. They were so positive, so encouraging. And I said one day, I think I said it 5 years ago, I said, I'm going to write a book with these quotes. And I did. I didn't realize it would come true.
You manifested it. You did. You wrote that book, and there's so many motivational quotes. I mean, the influx of positivity and the messaging around the importance of cultivating a positive mindset is so clear in that book. So it's amazing to see how years later you were able to do it.
Oh, it's incredible. And when I came one time for a photo shoot last year to thank Rick for all he taught me when I was a kid and all his positivity, mental strength, and all his encouragement and guidance in tennis. Then I came back and I kind of under my breath at the end of the photo shoot said, yeah, I have a book in mind. And to this day, I've never had anybody maximize opportunities like that. Like 3 weeks or 2 to 3 weeks later, he sent me a text message at work saying, how's the book coming? And I was like, oh my God, wow. Like I never expected anybody to follow up on something like that. And it was the best experience in my life since then. So
let me back the truck up here a little bit. I actually taught her and her twin sister, back in the day, they'd come to academy. They both went to Harvard. Okay. So all these years later, we've obviously collaborated on a book and we're going to do many more. My story's a little bit different. I've been on a tennis court since age 22. I actually grew up. I didn't pick up a racket till I was 12 years old. I taught myself, this is crazy. I taught myself how to play by 18 years old as the number one junior in Ohio Valley without a lesson. And here I am all these years later, and I teach more lessons than anybody in the United States. 7 days a week, 50 hours. I still have the same passion I did when I really got into this at 22. Been fortunate to kind of put Humpty Dumpty together and build some of the strongest minds besides tennis game. People went on to win Grand Slams, many national titles. But I think the most important thing is the passion that I still have to do it. And I love it just as much today as I did back then. So it's been an amazing ride and just keeps getting better. And now we're going to do a few more books, and the best is yet to come.
Yeah, it's so exciting. And, how do you keep that passion alive? I think that's a very rare experience to have for someone to fully love what they do and stay so committed to it. It's very hard to keep that same spirit there and present. So how do you do it?
Well, I've always been wired that way. That's the mindset. I always felt like if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And I prefer better, and I've kind of trained my mind ever since I was younger, not make excuses and always try to be the best I can be. And I look at things to a different lens. I tell people all the time what you may see is different than Rick may see, and that applies not just to, me coaching and teaching. I'm more a life coach than really a tennis coach, but I've kind of trained myself to be like that. And, I just fell in love with the game. And I think any coach or mentor or teacher, if you love helping others more than yourself, good things are going to be cooking in the oven, so I've just always been that way. And I still just love to help others. My living room is the tennis court. I love being on the tennis court, just helping anybody. And someone just asked me, they've asked me all the time, who's my favorite student, of all time? And people think it's going to be Venus or Serena or Capriati or Roddick or Moschino or Pierce or Sharapova or Kennan or Casper Ruud's dad or all these people that I've taught. And it's really who's on the other side of the net. That hour, that minute, that second. It doesn't matter where they are. And I think when you feel that way and you have that pride, you just fall in love with the game and the passion just keeps growing.
I love that. That's a really beautiful message, and it's really amazing that Dr. Neva, you also have this background and experience, as a pro tennis player, and then also moving into a medical background and being a doctor, talking about these subjects around resilience and having a strong mindset and the importance of positivity. You bring a really unique perspective, also being an athlete as well. So I want to transition a little bit into speaking more about the inspiration for Billion Dollar Mind. And I know there's many books to come down the line, but let's talk a little bit about what that initial thought was. What was the spark that, the two of you had for wanting to write this book that really is kind of like, a way to bring together lessons on resilience from both of your perspectives?
I think that's a great question because there's so many different seeds. We know that tennis players, professional athletes can't be number one or achieve great heights without a strong mind. And that's a given. That's standard. We know that. We know athletics need strong minds. And I myself studied it when I was a kid. I realized that the trigger for this book specifically was when I was struggling in life. Things were not going the way they should. There was maybe a tragedy outside. There was a family event and there was a lot of negativity in the family or something going on at work. And I was reaching a low in my performance. And I realized at that moment, I was like, what is this? Why is it that when I am at a low, right, it's probably my environment that's creating these negative thoughts inside me and I'm not performing poorly. But if all of a sudden, when I change my mind, I distracted, I talk to people, it's like, I was biking one day and I was talked to a couple and all of a sudden I became happy. And I realized my mind was so fickle. And I saw my friends, I graduated from Harvard, they're writing books and achieving so much. Why am I not there? What is wrong? And I realized it was my own thoughts. I was stopping myself. So that's when I decided to really study the mind. I'd already been studying it, but write this book for everyone else. Because in that moment, I realized if I stopped a certain thinking pattern, a certain loop, I could get myself out of that sadness, out of the negativity, and I could start performing better. And it was within a day, as soon as I realized it the next day, my performance at work, my performance at home was so excellent. And I even worked hard to find the right people in my life. So it all just started, it was a domino effect. It started with the right thoughts, with being positive, getting out of old thinking habits. and then taking away the fear, contacting Rick. Because for someone like me who's like so sheltered when I was young, it was so hard for me to talk to people and communicate as it would be for anybody else. So just to text him took me a long time. I remember I was like, I hope he doesn't say no to the photo shoot. I hope he doesn't say no. I was expecting no to the book. Like I didn't expect any of this to come out. So a lot of it came from thoughts. And that's what the book is about. Our thoughts are the stepping stone for our next level in life, for success, for our happiness, our joy. We got to figure those out. We got to figure out that computer programming. And so that moment that I realized it, I was like, I'm going to write something about this.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you speak about how thoughts are the currency of our dreams. And I think you just perfectly articulated like the meaning behind that. And I want to talk a little bit more about like the neuroscience perspective of how our thoughts impact our well-being and our reality. But going back to really the trigger point for wanting to start writing this book, you had mentioned that you were struggling with your performance and your negative thoughts were kind of permeating across all aspects of your life. And Rick, earlier you had talked about how you consider yourself also to be kind of like a life coach. And so when you're having athletes that are struggling on the court and their thoughts are just really, getting them down and it's affecting their performance, how do you properly coach them to give them the courage to get back up on their feet, to help them kind of reverse those negative thought patterns and inspire them to start thinking better thoughts?
That's really the wild card if you want to be the best you can be in anything. You control the situation, you don't let it control you. And it's all perspective. And this is what I actually help people, even though we're the worldwide leader in biomechanics. My partner, Dr. Brian Gordon, we've done all this research on biomechanics, the right way to hit the best possible way, the optimal way to hit a tennis ball. It's just the motivation and the mind stuff that I do with people to look at things and how to manage stress, how to flip it in your mind, how to take a negative and turn it into positive. So when we talk about the game of tennis, okay, well, any sport, but tennis, because it's individual, very different than a team sport. You got 20 seconds to flip it in your mind like it happened 20 years ago. And having the ability to remember, to forget is the most important thing, not only in sports, but in life, because that can stick to you like Velcro. And so if people just love to compete and they love the competition, they're going to handle the pressure in general a little better. But I just tell them one thing. If you're not going to listen to me or try to listen to me, why don't you imitate Nadal or Federer or Djokovic or Iga? Look how they handle things when they make a mistake. Right there's your roadmap, your blueprint. Follow that. There it is. It's video, live. Imitate that. You don't have to go to a sports psychologist. There's no hocus pocus voodoo stuff. Look how they handle it. They made a mistake. They're feeling the same way you do because we're all humans. We have that emotion go through our body. How are we going to respond to that? And I try to present it many different ways because every kid's a little different in the way I try to present it. But I try to also tell them, look at greatness. You want to get near greatness? Copy that. You want to get smarter? Be around smarter people. And so that's what I kind of play all the time. And I see kids do the same ritual as a lot of the top pros, even putting their tongue in their cheek, spinning their racket, pumping their racket, a little hop and a skip and a jump and a shake and a big, and they get distracted. And I always tell all the parents and kids this: how come you respond to a mistake differently when you're playing doubles than singles? It's almost like you got a therapist on the court, you miss a shot, you give them a high five, a hug, a kiss, because they distract you from that feeling of failure. And that's really what separates greatness in all sports. Can you handle pressure and stay calm? Because it's such a fine line at the highest level. There's better athletes than Djokovic and some of these guys, but they don't have grand slams. It's a game of inches from one ear to another. And so this is what I work on so much with everybody. And the sooner they buy in and they start doing this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they get a new habit, a new routine, and then mentally they become a machine.
I love that. It's really a testament to building that mental strength And you made so many good points in your response. Let me see if I can catch all of them. So the first thing that came to mind was this idea of just faking it till you make it, right? Like imitating what the great people are doing, that your mentors are doing, and just copy that. And the more you get into that habit and ritual and practice, the more you'll kind of like instill that into your own response. So it'll become more natural. And something else that really caught my attention to what you said was, this ability to bounce back. So we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all fail, but that's natural. So what's going to differentiate you isn't necessarily the failure, because we're all failing, but it's how quick can you get back to that neutral, calm state? How quick can you be resilient? How quick can you come back to, where you were? And so, I think that's really important to double down on, because when we fail or we freak out or we get anxious or we get stressed, it's so easy to go down the negative spiral and it just gets worse. But it's like, okay, how can I pause, take a breath, and be calm so I can get back and into what I have to do? I mean, on a completely different scale, this recording is kind of an example. We had some tech issues earlier. I was a little frazzled, but you were just calm like a cucumber, sitting there smiling, the both of you. And we figured it out and we got the recording to work. And it's like in moments of stress or high pressure or those feelings of anxiety that arise, it's so critical to stay calm, to stay cool and collected. So I think that your response is spot on. And, it's fascinating to see how sports can really be representative of these life lessons that we can bring into our day to day.
Estella, yeah. And I just wanted to emphasize that Rick said flip it and perspective. Those two things are so important. They're really important techniques. If you're like in the wrong state of mind, and I do this now every day since I read this book, and I'm so aware of it, just kind of flipping things so you have a positive outlook, and you're reframing it. So you're looking at the positivity, you start becoming more grateful, then all of a sudden you're able to cope with something that may not be in your best interest or may not be initially seem like a very good thing. So it's very important. That's a really important technique. There's a lot of depth behind those words, because it's very important to do. That's how you get back to that resilience. And the book obviously talks about a lot of techniques.
Definitely. And I'm glad you brought up this concept of reframing and cognitive reframing. Can you talk a little bit more about what's actually happening in our brains when we take these cognitive reframes? Like, why is it that by cognitive reframing, you're actually able to build more resilience? What's actually happening there?
I love that question. I was so excited to answer it, because now you've got the combination of, using mental strength and the science behind it and some of the foundation of our book. And I was thinking about it because I know you had asked this question, got me to think. So when you have any sort of the techniques in our book, whether it includes reframing, flipping it, positive affirmations, belief in oneself, all of a sudden, those are, a lot of them are sensory inputs. Some of them maybe an action, like, you're saying something positive, but a lot of them are sensory. So whatever is going on is going into the brain. And once we have that positive input into the brain, now we can have positive output. Okay, so if you go like, if the basics of this is like, if I touch my hand, right, and I feel, say something is hot, and my hand feels something really hot burning, I'll move it, right? So sensory goes up to the brain. Motor is what makes things happen, right? Same thing with the thoughts. Whatever comes into our head that's positive, we're going to have a motor output that's positive. If we have something negative, we're going to have a motor output that's negative. And so if you have a sad thought, you're kind of depressed, now you're not really doing anything, right? That's a negative feeling, a negative thought. Your negative input is going to create a negative output. If you have a positive input, you're going to have a positive output. That's why you want to say things that are positive. You want to think positive so you can get things going. I'll give you an example. I was going with my daughter to the Caribbean for a vacation. I'll never forget. For whatever reason, Delta didn't let us check in. We were like 3 hours in the line, and by the time I got into the checking in, they said you cannot make the flight, and you need to your luggage. You're not going to be able to have your luggage checked in, and you're going to have to reschedule for another day. I remember that moment. I was like, I got to use the techniques in my book. Because I've got 25 minutes to make the Orlando airport to get through security without luggage. I didn't even know what to do with the luggage. I was within 5 minutes, took that luggage down to a locker. Everything was positive. I can do it. I can do it. I just saw myself on the plane. And I took the luggage down to a locker, dripping in sweat. Nobody even knew where the lockers were. Threw it in a locker. Didn't even have time to close the suitcases, running upstairs, begging people, cutting lines, and everything was positive. I can do it. I can do it. If you say, I can't do it, all of a sudden you can't do it. And your body is not going to do it. You're going to miss the flight. So, and I know my daughter was saying that in the back, we can do it. We can make it. I was just so excited. In 10 minutes from the time we checked in, we got in, cutting lines, begging people, crying, got through a train and got into our flight. That is how positive thinking works. Same thing on a court or in a match. When you have a positive thought, like if you're playing a match, right, and you're down 5-1, but you think to yourself, I can do it. My opponent is hurting. Or if you say something like, they're going to say something like they're more tired than I am. If you flip it, or I'm stronger, then all of a sudden you have these thoughts and now you're going to have more energy. Thoughts will create positive outcomes physically. And that's a foundation. You've got a thought that's a sensory, right? And then an output is motor. So you're going to have a better outcome. And you're going to have more motion, you're going to have more activity, and it's going to be winning most likely.
To kind of put a bow around that, what I tell the parents and the kids all the time, everybody in general, they're kind of aware of what they eat, what they put into their mouth, okay, generally speaking. But are you like that? What you hear, what you listen to, what you watch, the people you're around, okay, what you put in, because everything goes into your subconscious and it's in there. Okay, that's why we remember things from long ago. And that's what people do not do. Some people like to be around, train wrecks and misery and the negativity in the TV. And, they like that stuff and they're on that merry-go-round and then they try to get out and it's hard, and every day, that's why you want to read positive stuff. Listen to motivational stuff on YouTube. Read Billion Dollar Mind. It's a game changer. There's 30 hours of private lessons from Rick Macy in this thing. I mean, there's so many things that you become a creature of habit. Once you can start going, you kind of become that. But we're not aware of what we listen to and hear. And parents need to understand that and teach their kids that, because things are just going to happen negatively no matter what. Then it's a matter of how you deal with it. But you do have a choice of what you want to do, okay? But you got to get into that routine. Like I said, then you'll become a machine.
Yeah, you have a choice. I think that's incredibly empowering because it's easy to feel like sometimes we don't, but we do. Because if we can think about how powerful our negative thoughts can be by predicting negative outcomes in our lives, the power of positivity is like tenfold, right? Even better. However, I do want to talk a little bit about toxic positivity because I know that it can be confused with what we're talking about. So can you share what is toxic positivity and how does what we're speaking about around affirmations, around cognitive reframing, all of that, all these different, techniques to create a healthier internal and external ecosystem for ourselves, how is that different from toxic positivity?
The reason why I'm laughing is because I can tell you my family has brought this up every day. They read the book. They had to find a criticism for it. Toxic positivity, because they enjoy the negativity and they enjoy being in that world. And toxic positivity has come up in my world. So basically, it's a term from what I understand from the discussions I've had is that it's being so positive that you don't see the reality. So it's almost like you're toxically positive and things are going so bad and you're avoiding the reality behind something that's devastating or something that's negative or something that's not successful. And I mean, the only way I can rebut all of that, because I obviously don't believe it. And I agree. Toxic positivity is like, you don't want to be so positive that I'm jumping off a cliff and I'm not going to die. You don't want to be stupid behind it. You don't want to say, I'm going to fly, and now I'm jumping off the cliff and you're dying. That's not what this is about. This is about reaching our goals and it's a journey. So when toxic positivity, people are like, their arm is cut off and they think, okay, the arm's going to come back or something like that. Or now they're losing something say it can be in relationships. You can have a lot of that. The person's not responding, but they will respond, or they love me. There's a lot of toxic positivity there. And what happens is you kind of have to use the feedback you get to navigate your next step. You can't just say, oh, everything is going to be perfect. You have to, there's going to be situations that are not perfect. And there has to be an awareness that this is not perfect. But in order to respond to such a difficult situation, you can't just keep thinking it's going to be perfect and keep going after it. You have to adjust your sails. You have to respond to the environment. You have to think through. And I think our book doesn't talk about toxic positivity, but it does talk about responding to the environment. We're not talking about ignoring the fact that something is bad has happened. In fact, we even talk about, there's a story where there's someone whose arm gets bitten, I believe it's a shark attack, very, very famous surfer, and her arm gets bitten off. And what we talk about is not the fact that she is going to think about an arm and it's going to grow back or something like that, or she's going to think that she's going to surf like she used to, but what she's going to use is gratitude for everything she does have. And she used that so much gratitude, so much faith in God, that she actually got married, she has kids, so she was able to use something to overcome the deficit she had. So that's really what it is. It's not about ignoring the negative. It's about dealing with it head on, right on, and I also have patients who are in wheelchairs. They have no arms and legs at all, but they're smiling. They think they're beautiful. They act beautiful. I have someone who's married. I have so many people who are not married and they have arms and legs and they're scared, to talk to people. So it's really interesting. It's about dealing with the problems rather than avoiding it, and then seeing what toxic positivity is like, overlooking it, ignoring it. No, that's not what it is.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction. I think a lot about this idea of happiness and being happy and trying to be in a positive mindset, but also in relation to sadness and feeling anxious and feeling upset, because our emotions really exist on a spectrum. And as I've continued to build this podcast and get to interview really fascinating people like the both of you, I've been getting to learn how people approach what it means to be happy and their perspective on happiness and how to cultivate joy. And something that I've continued to learn is that happiness really isn't about like negating the bad, quote unquote, bad things that happen in life. It's about learning to embrace it, and the way in which you approach the negative experiences is what's going to inform whether or not you have more of those negative ones or better ones down the line. And to your point, it's all about that mindset, right? So I'd love to hear from the both of you. Maybe we can start with you first, Rick. How do you define happiness and cultivating joy?
Great question. Happiness is what you make it. Fun is what you make it. I'm happy as can be doing this. I'm happy as can be eating popcorn, watching TV. I don't need other things to make me happy. Material things, other things, like people say, thank God it's Friday. I think, thank God it's every day. You should appreciate what you have, not what you don't have. But you got to train yourself, because we let the weather affect us, people affect us. Everything affects us. Sure, things might bump up a little bit on the joy meter or the sadness. We're all human, but how you deal with it so you get back to that ideal performance state and not go off track so much. So happiness to me is, well, first off, it's being on the tennis court, because I just love to help people. I don't change strokes, I change lives. So I love doing that. So when I'm out there 11 hours, like I have been most of the week, every day, it's not like work. I feel like I'm hardly working because I love it. So I hope that kind of answers the question about happiness, because I think it's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, I love that.
I've been thinking about this question a lot, because what I think happiness is that it's the bliss point of not wanting anything else. There's so much in bliss, you're not wanting anything else. And our book helps you get there.
Yeah.
Because you have to kind of figure out what it is that you want. See, that's really what I think is really important. Everybody has different things that they want.
Yeah.
Everybody has different things that produce endorphins. So, things that give us the joy. Some people like food. Some people like exercise. Some people like movement. Some people like teaching tennis. Some people like helping others. Some people like curing sickness, or solving a problem. So we have to figure out what we want. And once we're at that stage, we're like, okay, for me, it's like, I love love. For me, I love that feeling of love. I need that to perform. If I don't have it, I can't. So if I don't have it, I'm always kind of this sort of like grumpy. Like, I don't care about food. I don't need to eat. I don't need to go out for dinner, or I don't need to go on fancy trips, but I need something. Like my daughter, she needs food. And so everything is, the whole house is food. It's 24/7 cooking. Some people like Rick loves tennis and helping people. So you got to figure out what it is. This book helps you go through the in-depths of your own computer program. You really, really got to figure that out. If you don't spend that time on yourself, then you'll never know. You're kind of in this edgy state. Like you don't feel joyful. You don't feel bliss. You're kind of wanting something, but you're not there. You're never really performing at your highest level. There's something lacking always until you figure out what you really, really want. The deepest level. You can even go many layers. Why do I want, a certain thing or certain emotion? Why? And then keep going back and figure out. Sometimes it stems from childhood. Sometimes it stems from your instinct. That the thoughts that you have all the time, 24/7, there's something that you really love to do when no one else is watching. Figuring out that bliss point is my definition of happiness. Because then all of a sudden you don't even look at your phone. You don't look at Facebook or any of the social media. You don't look at other people. You're just happy with you. That's bliss. That's happiness. Not wanting anything because you have everything.
Let me expand upon it a little bit.
Yeah.
I can make a left turn, and this deals more with mental strength. And, when you said happiness, most people, when they're winning a tennis match or you're winning, you're happy or you're happier. Okay. But the way to get mentally stronger, and if you just enjoy the competition, you're competing because you love to, and that brings happiness. You just love to compete. You love the battle. And when you're like that, you handle pressure better and you become mentally stronger. Sure, everybody'd rather be up 5-0 than down 5-0, but at the top of the game, they're still enjoying the competition. And it's all about they're happy competing. And that's what really separates people you see on television, then the next. It's from one ear to another.
It's not the destination, it's the journey, right? Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, but they love what they do, and it makes them happy. That's why they play a sport, or they're doing that profession. Like you said, I do tennis, or you do this, or she's doing that. But you love it so much, you do it better. They love competition, so they handle the mental part better, the ups and downs. I know it kind of went away from the question, but I think that's very important for people to understand. At that level, they just love so much to compete and try to kick your butt.
That's a really great point. And it actually brings up something interesting, because from what I'm hearing is like they learn to fall in love with the challenge. And the challenge isn't going to be happy you're not going to be happy all the time when you're challenged, because inevitably you're pushing yourself. There's going to be difficulty that you're going to experience. I think that, Viktor Frankl talks about this really well in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. It is through the pursuit of finding meaning through those difficult experiences. So maybe when it's on the court, it's like the consistent challenge of having to prove that I can do it. Even if I'm a pro athlete, it's like every time you show up on the court, you kind of have to humble yourself a little bit. And that's what keeps you great. And I think that's what differentiates great players from really great players, or just, greatness from extraordinary greatness, right? When you're consistently pushing yourself in that way, because happiness can be equated with like complacency too, kind of what you were both mentioning. I can be happy from sitting and watching TV, or I can be happy from this conversation. Like there's degrees of happiness that we can feel, but it's really that like aha moment, or really, the ability to kind of tap into flow, or that sweet spot where you're like, wow, like my cup is really filled up. I think it's from the meaning that comes from some of the difficulty that we experience.
You got to make yourself happy. You cannot rely on other things to make you happy. You control the situation. Don't let it control you. You can't. When you're doing that, you're going to be up and down, and mentally you're going to get depressed. You'll be all over the map if you rely on that or others all the time, and you got to train yourself to become like that, because at the end of the day, the answer always is in the mirror.
And not let others control you. You control the narrative. I think that's really, really good advice. What other pieces of advice, or rather strategies, do the both of you implement to stay mentally strong and also cultivate joy in your lives? Is there like a consistent well-being practice that you do? Maybe it's gratitude journaling or daily affirmations. Like, is there something that's like your go-to to kind of keep your mind fit and mentally strong?
I probably do a lot of things. First of all, I definitely talk to Rick. He's very positive. So that's a great thing, having a great connection and who's more positive than me, just so extraordinarily mentally strong. But I go biking every day. And when I bike, I'm always listening to lectures about mental strength. That's my passion. So I'll always do that. At least even if it's 15, 20 minutes, I'll do that. And so the biking makes me happy. I enjoy every moment of that. I think another thing I actively do is when I'm in the car or downtime, I'll always be watching my thoughts. Any time my thoughts are deviating to a negative feeling or even the slightest bit of negativity, they just get curved right back in. I'm like, that needs to stop. Any negative thought, negative thinking pattern, or even a limiting belief that I can't do something, all that stuff has to kind of be trained. And I know Rick is talking about food, like you have a good diet. For food, you have to have a good mental diet. And that includes feeding yourself, that you have to generate thoughts that are healthy and very positive. So I make an active decision. I watch those thoughts like a hawk. I make sure that they don't deviate. And if there's somebody who's negative or kind of produces negative thoughts, I try to stay away from them, or I recognize it, almost predict it. I'm like, I'm going to see that person. That person's going to say something negative. And when I predict it, I have a shield automatically that doesn't impact me. I'm like, okay. And so when I'm in the car, I'm like, I'm alone, talking to myself, it's sometimes hear something negative coming from within me. It's very common. We do that as humans. And then all of a sudden we'll stop it. So that actively weeding out a negative thought is very helpful.
I love that. Mental diet. Noted. That's a great terminology. That's a great term. Yeah.
I think for anybody listening, I think number one, you got to have a routine. Okay. You have to have a routine. Hopefully it's going to be a positive one. People have routines, but they're maybe not the best ones, but you should try to get into a routine and have structure as much as possible. You know, you can deviate a little bit. Obviously you got to deviate a little bit, but that's would be the number one thing that I would want people to hear from me is once you get so much more done where you're not all over the map. You're not like doing this and doing that. You got to get into a routine. That's number one. Number two, you should say thank you so much throughout the day. You have no idea. And I mentioned this before. You got to appreciate what you have instead of what you don't have. People start appreciating more when something tragic happens or whatever. I wish this, I wish that, or whatever. You got to appreciate every day. We're all day to day, okay? But we don't think anything's ever going to happen bad, and it does. So that would be, you should be thanking people all the time. You should treat everybody the way that you want to be treated. You should treat everybody the way you want to be treated. And that's what I try to do, even though I've been, successful and done all these things. And I'm just feet on the ground, answer everybody's email, talk to everybody, autographs, pictures, whatever, and just very down to earth and appreciative of everything instead of taken for granted or you lose sight of where you really came from. This is very important for people to understand, as you become more successful or whatever, to treat everybody the same and appreciate every single day. Next thing, you asked kind of about me. I actually sweep the sidewalk. I open up the park every day at 5 o'clock. At this age, I'm a park ranger. I'm there 7 days. I'm a park ranger. It's on my resume, okay? So I actually sweep the sidewalks every day in front of the tennis. And I pick up the garbage and I pick up tennis balls and all that stuff. I could be chirping at other people. Why isn't this done? Why isn't that done? There's 100 things that could bother me. Nothing bothers me because I've trained myself to handle stuff. And as a result, you're calmer, you're more positive. People feel that energy. And I've kind of become like that. And people want their kids around that. People want that type of stuff. So, and one guy I did a podcast. He goes, someone asked me why I pick up the tennis balls. After you hit, there's like 1,000 tennis balls, and I'm there picking them up with the parent and the kid. I said, in all my years, they've never jumped back in the basket on their own. So, I didn't understand the question really. I look at it as, well, bend over and pick them up. It's good exercise. So taking a negative and I'm turning it positive, just like picking up the garbage or whatever. It's all perspective. It's how you look at the game of life through a different lens. Okay. So that's kind of what's worked for me. But the key is consistency. You can't do it Monday, Wednesday, Sunday, and if you miss a time, you should feel guilty. And then when you're playing the game within the game within the game of yourself, good things are in the oven because you're just going to keep reaching new heights every single day.
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed the times in my life where I feel the most on top of things in my life is when I'm in a very good structure and routine and I'm consistent with it. Because the more consistency you have, the more like self-efficacy develops and you're like, oh, I can keep doing these good habits because I've proven to myself I can already do it. Right. So I think that's such a great point. And, I used to be a rower in high school. So I was very disciplined through that sport. And I think that athletics really do teach us these incredible life lessons. So really fortunate to have the both of you here on the podcast to bring me back to some of my days in athletics, nowhere near a pro level whatsoever. But I do think that
you were a rower. Now you're in the front row. So
exactly.
You're in the front row. So it's all good.
Changed shape over time, but we're still here. We're still rowing in some capacity. I love that. As we wrap up today, I think you guys have kind of answered my last question, but something that I ask every guest that comes onto the podcast is, what is something that brings you endorphins? So would love to hear what is something that just brings you a little bit of joy every day.
I think I mentioned it already. Oh,
go ahead.
No, yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, listen, he's jumped up here. I have 4 cats, okay, but I have one that I've trained, and it's my best student of all time. It's not Venus, Serena, Capriati, Roddick, Sharapova. I have a cat that I've literally trained. He's like my shadow. He goes with me everywhere. I got to stroke him like 5 times a day whenever he's around, okay? He follows me everywhere. I can throw a little ball, and he can go get it and bring it back to me, okay? So I don't know. I train people and animals, so I'm like a versatile guy. So that brings me a lot of joy because I know that this cat is having like probably the best life ever.
Where's Charlie? Where is he?
He's probably waiting on me downstairs.
Yeah.
His name's not Charlie, it's Charlie.
Oh, sorry.
He got upgraded.
Charlie.
I love that. What about you, Dr. Neva? What brings you endorphins?
I would say I just love moving. I'm always moving. I'm always exercising, dancing, running. I mean, there's not a second where I'm not moving. Like, I love to move. I love to stretch. I love to go out biking, as I said. I just love it. I love to lift weights and do things. I'm constantly, like, if you see me waiting in any line, I'm always doing my abs. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I love that feeling of being able to have like, a good body and moving around. I love dancing and music and rhythm. And as I said, I love to spend time with Rick. It's been a great experience. That's fun being around people who bring out the best in you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you guys are the dream team, and that's very reflected in your book, which was so great to read and really helped inform this conversation. So I'm glad I got to listen to the audiobook, before we got to sit down today. And for everyone listening out there, you can grab a copy of your own on Amazon. I'll hyperlink all of the links to the book and to, stay connected with Dr. Neva and Rick. So, thank you again. It was really wonderful having the both of you on the podcast. And I am so excited to, stay in touch and get to release this to my audience.
There we go.
All right. Thank you.